A Democratic senator warns that the U.S. president plans to bypass Congress to approve a major arms sale to Saudi Arabia. Chris Murphy says that Donald Trump plans to use a loophole and tensions with Iran to sell bombs to Saudi Arabia. The senator says Trump wants to use his emergency powers in a way that would prevent Congress from objecting. Murphy says that there is no new emergency in the region apart from the humanitarian crisis in Yemen, which he says was caused by arms sales to Riyadh. Congress has blocked part of the arms sales to Saudi Arabia over civilian casualties in the Saudi war on Yemen. President Trump says that the arms sales to the Saudis generates jobs back home. To discuss that more, we're joined by Mr. Max Igan, radio host and political commentator, joining us live from Brisbane. Thank you very much, Mr. Igan, for sparing some time for Press TV's World News. Now, do you believe that, first of all, how much truth is there to this kind of report that Donald Trump would want to bypass Congress to send arms to Saudi Arabia? Of course, we would not be surprised to know that this is true. And the second question would be, do you believe that the Congress has any power when it comes to Donald Trump?
Well, they're two very good questions. Trump has indicated very much previously that he is prepared to do everything he can to maintain these arms sales to Saudi Arabia, so it wouldn't surprise me if he had said this. And we've seen by Trump's actions that he tends to override the government whenever he can. He sort of does what he wants, so it wouldn't surprise me if both of these things were true. It wouldn't surprise me at all. You know, and people have to understand what's going on in Yemen. I mean, this is an absolute abomination. It's actually grotesque what's happening there. The people in the United States have no real concept of what is really going on in Yemen. And the arms supplies have to stop to Yemen. This would stop the war completely. We've seen responses in France and in Italy where port suppliers have refused to load ships because they do not want to be complicit in the genocide that is going on in Yemen. And to think that Trump would do this simply to maintain American jobs, I mean, this is blood money, pure and simple. But it wouldn't surprise me if he'd said that, because he has indicated as much before.
So, Mr. Igan, do you believe that the Congress has any power when it comes to Donald Trump? He seems to be having his way no matter what.
Well, he seems to be sort of overriding everything, so I don't really think Congress would have any power over Donald Trump. I mean, they could try. It would be nice to think that they could, but with Trump's actions, you can never really tell what's around the corner. And he seems to be supporting this war and supporting all sorts of conflict in the Middle East and making sure it's continuing as much as he can. So it wouldn't surprise me if he just overrides anything that they attempt to do to stop these arms sales. And, you know, he'll rally the people behind him, you know, jobs and money and, you know, boots on the ground and all this sort of stuff. It's saying that it's all for the American people. Like I said, the American people have no real concept of what's going on in Yemen. It's news that's not even reported generally in the United States. To them, it's just jobs, and that's the unfortunate reality.
So basically, how much do you think the Americans actually do care? What I'm trying to say is, do they support Trump's idea that as long as jobs are created in the United States, it doesn't matter how many people are being killed elsewhere in the world? Or is this something that only Donald Trump, as a businessman, believes?
I think it's Donald Trump's business sense. If the American people really knew what was going on in Yemen, they wouldn't support it. I mean, the American people are generally good people. They are. They don't want war, and they don't really understand what their government is doing, because the media in the United States simply doesn't feed the American people the information they need to have a complete overview of what the world situation is. It isn't until you step outside of the United States that you start getting information. I've found that with a lot of American visitors that have come to see me, a lot of American travelers that I've met. They're very surprised at the view the world has of the American people, because it's not something that they see on the ground. I mean, I've found that in most countries I go to, they're full of good people, and most of these good people have no real idea what their governments are getting up to. They just believe whatever their media tells them, and that's just the way it goes, unfortunately.
So we saw once that Congress tried to block these arms sales to Saudi Arabia. Of course, the president does have the power to veto that. Do you believe that if word gets out and that Congress makes some moves that actually gets the news headlines, do you believe that the people would rally behind Congress and demand this to stop something that we saw happening, as you mentioned yourself, in Europe?
I do. I have plenty of faith in the American people to do the moral thing and to take the moral stand on this if they actually knew what was going on. So if Congress is able to bring this to the attention of the people, I think they would rally behind such a move. You know, like I said, you can't judge these countries by their people. A lot of the people don't know, and a lot of the people that I've met in the United States, I've been there quite a lot, and they're good people. So we can't really judge the actions of Donald Trump by the mood of the American people. I really believe that they would rally behind this if they knew what was going on. And we've got to look at the strings that are pulling Donald Trump as well. I mean, Donald Trump is heavily influenced by certain little countries in the Middle East that may be having quite a large say in world affairs. We don't need to name who that might be. But this whole Middle Eastern conflict, you know, supports interests that are far beyond those of America. If the American people knew that, I think they would actually make a stand about it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Max Igan, radio host and political commentator, with his elaborations regarding U.S. possible arms sales deals to Saudi Arabia.